Hey guys, and welcome to my kitchen. So I have this tradition that once or twice a week, I actually go ahead and make my very own homemade white bread. I love making bread. I'm a bit of a carb junkie. I just can't get enough. So I'm wanting to share my sort of secret, easy peasy, best bread in the world recipe. And so here's the ingredients that you guys will need to have to make it happen. You're gonna need 1 1/3 cup of water, 2 tablespoons of sugar, 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast, or about 1 package of pre-measured yeast, 2 tablespoons of oil, 3 cups of flour, all-purpose flour, bread flour is okay, and 1 teaspoon of salt. So I admit, I cheat a little bit when I make my own bread. See, instead of putting it in a big bowl and mixing it and putting all that hard work out there, I just toss it in my bread machine. See, there's a pastry or a basic bread setting where you don't actually cook anything in the machine. It just sort of kneads it for you. So just go ahead and toss your ingredients in your machine or do it by hand. If you're going to put it in the machine, use the manufacturer settings, which typically are to put your wet ingredients in the machine first, then pile on the dry stuff, put the yeast at the very top, use it as the last thing on the end. Then just go ahead and click go. Last ingredient is the yeast. So the last thing that we need to do is take this bucket here and we're going to toss it into the bread machine. Now typically when I make my best bread in the world recipe, all I do is I set it in the bread machine and I actually set it on the dough cycle. That allows the machine to mix it up, and then I actually take it out of the machine and put it inside of a traditional loaf baking pan. So now that we have our dough, it's pretty much ready to go now. It's gone through a full cycle, and we're getting ready to toss it into our baking pan. Now I got a nice glass dish here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and grease it, put some flour inside of it just so the bread doesn't stick to the pan when we're finished with our final product. It's so exciting. But anyway, we're just gonna go ahead, shape it, toss it in there, then toss it in the oven for 350 for probably 30 to 45 minutes depending. So why don't we go ahead and get that started. Okay, let's go ahead and grease this pan. Now I'm using some shortening here. If you don't have shortening or lard, you can obviously use a non-stick cooking spray. Just as easy and probably just as good because you're not going to miss any patches in this pan, but that's okay. While we have this going here, we can go ahead and preheat our oven if we want, but it's all really up to you. Okay, I'll just put about a tablespoon of flour in here. Now this is how I do it. I just sort of shake it around. It doesn't need to be perfect, and it's okay if we get some on the countertop because we are going to let our bread sort of fall out onto the countertop. Knock out just a little bit of stuff in there. You can see it's pretty well coated. There's still some tiny patches where it's not perfect in there, but the bread will be okay. It doesn't have to be perfectly greased. Okay, now we're just gonna unload this dough here. I like to sort of sneak my fingers around one side. And when you do this, your bread will deflate, but you don't need to worry because bread goes through a constant process of expanding, deflating, expanding, deflating. When we pull it out of here and put it into the next pan, it's actually gonna have to rise again in order to get ready to bake. So we got pretty much everything out of there. We can just set it aside. I've learned that whenever you put stuff in the bread maker, and let's say you still have little pieces of dough in there, just let it set and dry for a few hours. Usually it will harden, stuff just comes right out. You don't even need to wash it or do anything messy, so it's kind of nice. Okay. We're just gonna do kind of a light, not real kneading in my mind. We're just gonna fold the dough just a little bit. We want it to have sort of that dough shape, and then we just sort of toss it right in here. We just sort of tuck it in this pan. Can you see that? The tucking in there? We're gonna tuck it in the pan. Just a little under. It's not obviously fully leveled here yet, but we're just gonna let it sit there for probably 30 minutes until it fully rises. So now it's just a matter of time. What you wanna do to let it rise, put it in a warm place. Now typically, again, I'll set my bread on top of the stove top while, you know, the heat from underneath it from the oven actually causes the bread to rise. But in your kitchen should be good. You can also put maybe a little bit of saran wrap on top of it to let it rise. Some people put like a thin but dampened cloth on top. Again, it's just all about finding a way to retain that heat near the bread, because in order for the yeast to fully activate, it needs some sort of warmth. So as long as it's in a warm place, it should be good. Again, we're gonna let this bread rise, this dough rise, should I say, for about 30 minutes. That'll let it fully come up, and in the meantime, we'll get to see some magic happen. It's pretty cool. So I guess now it's just a matter of waiting. So we let the dough rise for about 30 minutes now, which is perfect. I mean, look at this. The dome shape at the top of this is just amazing. You can go ahead and toss it in the oven if you like, but I want to give it a little bit nicer of a feel, a little bit more professional grade quality. And to do so, I'm going to go ahead and scour the top of the bread just 3 different times in 3 different places. And what we're going to do is get a very sharp knife. We're going to take that knife and then we're going to glide it across the top very quickly. We're just going to go quick, quick, quick. And we're going to dig it into about, I would say, 1/2 inch deep. And once it's that far deep, move on. And then you're going to do the next line. Quick, quick, quick. And you're going to do this until you have 3 different parts on the top, and then we're going to let it rise for just a little bit while longer, and then we can toss it in the oven. So let's go ahead. Now ready? This is the first one. You barely want it to touch the top. It may take you a few tries, but once you get that started, it's starting to divide. I'm trying to be an excellent teacher here. See this? It's beautiful. If you push too hard, it's gonna cause the bread to deflate. But if you do it lightly, look at that. It's nice, it's got a nice quality. Okay, the next one. Again, it's all about just being very light. You don't even wanna put much pressure on it at all. That's why you have a really sharp knife. And once you just graze the top of this, it'll push through. So really, I mean, this bread looks pretty amazing as is. I'm gonna let it rise for about another 10 to 15 minutes. So in the meantime, I'm gonna go ahead and start preheating my oven. Now, typically when you're making bread, you always wanna have the oven preheated. You don't wanna toss anything in cold and then let the heat rise, because then it bakes things differently and it just doesn't turn out right. Again, in this recipe, we're going for 350 degrees in a metal pan. If you have a glass dish like this, go for 325. It's a 25-degree difference just to deal with the way the metal and the glass conduct heat. It's a very different process, and it's so delicate that if you were to put your glass pan in at a higher temperature, it would probably end up burning your bread, which is no fun at all. So again, we're gonna let this rise here for another 15 minutes. In the meantime, I'm gonna go ahead and preheat my oven, and then when that's all said and done, my oven will be ready to go. The bread will be ready and risen, and it'll just be a perfect addition to my kitchen. Again, it's wonderful to make bread in your own time. It's inexpensive, it's delicious, it smells fantastic, and really it's just an accomplishment that I think a lot of people, you know, it's not a difficult thing to do, but boy, it can be really, really fun. And so let's just go ahead and let it rise, and I can't wait to get this sucker in the oven. And there you have it, from start to finish. It takes about an hour and a half to make this loaf, but boy, I mean, the results can be absolutely rewarding. I mean, take a look at this here. I mean, it's just so beautiful to see that definition, the lines really come out here. Now, of course, when you're done with baking the bread, you take it out of the oven. You're gonna wanna actually take it out of that loaf pan, putting it on a cooling rack, and just letting it dry. It may take actually a couple hours for it to cool down completely. But in the meantime, I would say top it off with some butter, some olive oil, just to give it some nice color, and also some decent flavoring to the loaf. You know, for me, I just love eating this bread plain. You know, I slice it up, sometimes I'll toss it into the toaster, make it into sandwiches, whatever the case may be. But really, for about 30 cents per loaf, it's just one thing that, one, I find it just so rewarding, and two, inexpensive, that I can't resist making this, and making this a tradition in my home, and certainly I hope you guys will make it a tradition in yours. So until the next time, you know, I just wish you guys a happy baking day, and hopefully you guys too will find some great rewards with the best bread ever recipe.